We give up more than we get in the following sense. As I say, the program is an information sharing program. It has to do with ICE having access to information from the FBI and other federal agencies. That is a decision made at the federal level. Today, without secure communities, we send all fingerprints to the FBI. Those fingerprints are available to ICE today, and we refer all convicted felons who are undocumented people to ICE for deportation. I believe that's the right policy. But by joining the MOA, we joined 2 years earlier a program that has the following, I think, downsides. One, it has not focused on serious offenders. ICE's own and the Department of Homeland Security's own data show that only 1 in 4 of those who have been deported under the program were serious criminal offenders. It deports people who are at least questionably not even involved in criminal activity. At least that's what the preliminary review of the data we have gotten from ICE shows. It decreases the willingness of people to cooperate with police on crime solving, and that is a serious concern, meaning that people in communities who are worried about secure communities may not be willing to come forward and cooperate with police in the other efforts that police have to do to solve a whole host of crimes. Domestic violence is an example that we hear an awful lot about from people in the law enforcement community. And it increases the risk of ethnic profiling and frankly raises the whole level of fear. So when you think about the things that we lose in relation to what we get from the program, it did not seem to me that signing this MOA was right for the Commonwealth, and so I directed the Secretary to inform the federal authorities accordingly. You should know that law enforcement, local elected officials, mayors and others, and residents showed up in force in the several community meetings that we had. And Richard, I'm going to thank you for your, is Nerys here? Nerys, thank you also. And Josiane, for your role in convening and moderating those sessions. I think, Greg, you might have been there, or Kurt was.
Kurt would, yeah.
At a number of them as well. We took a lot of feedback. Folks are in touch with my office all the time through the Constituent Services Office. You should know that opinion was running 4-1 against signing the memorandum of agreement in terms of the contact with my office. I think there is a very loud minority of folks who think that this actually contributes something, but there's quite a broad view that we sensed from the work we did at the grassroots level that this is not on balance right for this Commonwealth, and so I think this is the right decision. And I've been taken to task by some for taking the time we took to come to conclusion. I think this is an important enough and sensitive enough issue that it was worth taking time to actually understand it and see what the experience has been in other communities and other states, to study that data, to get feedback from law enforcement and from regular old folks as well, and to have that bear on the decision. Today is not just about secure communities. We can talk about any issues that are on your minds. If I don't have the answers, the chances are pretty good that either Richard or Greg will. And if we don't, we'll get back to you with the answers. You should know that, let me just mention a couple things about where we are economically, if you don't mind, at the outset. Is that all right? Can I take a minute more? Do you mind? A little bit more on the economy, and then just say a word or two about the tornado and the response, the tornadoes and the response to it, which has had such a profound impact on communities in the Commonwealth. First of all, economically, we are growing now our state economy twice as fast as the national economy. Our unemployment rate is down to 7.8%, which is well below the national average. We're adding jobs faster than 46 other states. We continue to be #1 in the nation in student achievement, in healthcare coverage, in veteran services, in clean energy initiatives. None of this is by accident. It's because we've pursued a strategy based on education, innovation and on infrastructure, and that strategy is working. It's taking hold. We know we have a lot more work to do, but as I travel around the country and I talk to my counterparts in other parts of the country, you should know that we are well ahead of much of the rest of the country in our recovery, and we want to keep that. We want to keep that going, and we have, I think, some pretty good, some reasons to hope that our recovery will continue and become more broad, which is enormously important. I also want you to know that the impact of these tornadoes last week has been profound, but the response has been equal to the tragedy. There were 3 confirmed tornadoes that touched down over a swath running from Westfield to Sturbridge, I think was this far east. That's quite a lot of distance. I have walked in the communities and I've flown over the whole length of the destruction, and it is devastating. When you see the level of physical destruction, it is quite remarkable that we lost only 3 souls. That is not to say that those losses aren't profound for those individual families, but to lose 3 people when we lost what appears to be tens of millions of dollars of physical damage, houses collapsed and trees and so forth on houses, is extraordinary. 200 people were hurt. Most of them who were hurt are out of hospital at this point. Most of the shelter population is going down at this point. No one has gone hungry or gone without shelter. 17 agencies have come together in 3 recovery centers we've set up in the region, one in Springfield, one in Southbridge, and one in Monson on the Palmer line, to be regional response centers where people can go and get their questions answered or get services, emergency human services, food, shelter, emergency cash, clothing, counseling, for example. Also support for small businesses who need help and advice getting themselves back together. There are folks from the Division of Insurance there as well who are helping individuals with their insurance claims. There are translation services as needed in the communities, in these recovery centers as well. And we're working very well with local officials and with the federal government. We will, through the process of applying for presidential disaster declaration, which is the next step in raising the resources needed for the rebuild. But the real point, or not the real point, an additional point, which is, I think, a very hopeful one, is the sense of neighborliness and community that you've seen on the ground in the places that have been affected is moving. It's beautiful. How people have stepped forward to help, to introduce themselves to their neighbors, to help in providing shelter and clothing and encouragement and prayers for people who have been displaced. I met a woman, I've told some of these stories already, a woman I met sitting on her front step in Munson, and all that was left of her house was that front step. The sofa from the living room is the only thing she was able to identify, and that was a half a block away. Her checkbook register was recovered in the town of Milton. She lives in Munson. Milton is 80 miles away from her home. I met a couple who had just made their last mortgage payment on their house before it was completely destroyed. I met a couple who were turning into their driveway in Brimfield just as they saw in the rearview mirror the funnel coming over the hill right down toward them. They ran inside and with their 3-month-old and huddled in the basement and if you've talked to people out on the ground, they describe the sound of freight trains. That's what a lot of people describe this, the sound of a freight train coming. If you've been, and the feel of a freight train with all the shaking and rattling. And they huddled down in the basement, looking down, holding each other and praying while this sound of the freight train passed, and all this wind. And finally it died down, and they looked up, and stood up and looked up, and there was blue sky because their house had blown out from on top of them. The granite countertop that was in their kitchen was in a neighbor's living room 50 yards away. I saw a school bus, fortunately empty, but a school bus on its side, this is from the air, on its side in a swamp that was 2 miles away from the nearest road. It's extraordinary what the devastation has been, and it's equally extraordinary what the response of regular people has been to their neighbors' calamity. And that is a very, very hopeful thing, because I think a lot of you who have followed the way we talk about our work here in the Commonwealth during the campaigns and elsewhere know how strongly I feel that we have to see our stake in each other's struggles, that we have to understand the sense we're in this together. And what I'm seeing on the ground, beyond the official response, beyond the emergency agencies and the practical needs that the government is trying to provide, is that our neighbors, our regular old residents, understand the sense that we are in this together and have stepped up in really wonderful ways accordingly. And I wanted you to know that, because I think it's something to be proud of. So